History for Foos. ButchEscobar.
What's up?
Felipe Esparza. Before we even start, don't forget to subscribe to to this channel.
Subscribe to the channel, to the podcast.
Also, what is your Instagram? We didn't mention it last time.
At ButchEscobar.
Any more questions you need about anything? Butch your man. Don't Google it. Ask Butch. That should be a hashtag. Ask Butch.
Ask Butch? I don't know about that. That sounds like a lot of pressure for me.
History for Fools. I hope you guys liked the last episode. We dug in deep and we pretty much covered what we could remember.
Yeah, most of vaudeville, I would say. I went home and I thought about a few things that we might have missed. And that, because there's so many elements, and this is the hard part about doing a podcast like this, is that there's so many crossovers between the different genres, because American stand-up comedy spans vaudeville all the way till now. But there's so many crossovers because there's a lot of guys that were in vaudeville, like George Burns, Eddie Cantor, Milton Berle, that started out in vaudeville and then made the crossover. So we're gonna do a lot of that. Doing a lot of that throughout the podcast.
Radio too, or just vaudeville?
All the guys that I just mentioned right now started in vaudeville, and there was a period of time where, as vaudeville was rising, there was also the more dirtier shows, because if we talk about Working Blue, right? The reference to Working Blue.
Yeah, I think Keith Albee from the Orpheum.
The Keith Albee circuit.
They would, I guess they would go over your set, and they'll send you an envelope, and in the envelope there was it was written in blue paper.
Right.
It was typed with your material to take out of the bits.
Yeah.
And that's how it became. It was labeled blue material.
Working blue, and if you worked too blue, or if you worked too blue too many times, or if you wanted to just work blue, you would go.
It's funny to know how the reference of that came from, huh? Because people say, "Oh man, he works too blue."
Yeah,
you didn't even know why you say it.
Well, it's that thing has made itself all the way over. I remember when the Playboy Channel.
What if you're a norteño and they tell you, bro, you're working blue?
Then you kill yourself?
I told that to Birdman one time. He took it personal. Birdman, the comedian from San Jose, and he was working blue, and he's from Northern California, and I forgot that.
He's a norteño. Yeah, he got all sad.
So after that, he just quit.
Did he quit comedy, or he quit the norteños?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, that was the thing. That's the term, Working Blue. I remember the HBO Playboy Channel had that squiggly lines, and and I would go into my parents' room and watch it in the daytime, and there was a show called Electric Blue.
Electric Blue.
Yeah, and it was in reference to Working Blue being dirty, and then for the longest time I would hear Working Blue, or people would be like, "Oh, you work blue." What the fuck does that even mean? And then now this, as we are doing this, it's uncovered that this is what you need to take out of your material. This is unacceptable. And again, as we said in the last podcast, the Keith Albee Orpheum circuit banked itself off of working in very Christian holy circuits, where so you had to be very clean to be doing those shows. But a lot of people who didn't do those or didn't want to do those, they ended up in the burlesque circuit. And it wasn't, those were like burlesque and strip joints are two different things, and that's what we're going to talk about. Because burlesque was the twirly titty thing. Yeah.
And then the burlesque was
no, burlesque was a twirly titty thing.
It was the twirlies. And
what were they called again? Someone's gonna type in what they were called. But that was where you would go, and so burlesque was kind of it sounds like to me from what I read, was that this was kind of a purgatory for comedians, and so you were just stuck there. And we'll talk about this more later, but this is where Abbott and Costello kind of first come in, because they worked the burlesque scene.
And
right before radio became very popular.
Right here in Los Angeles, California, where I'm from, one of the last burlesque theaters was on Hill Street on I would say it was on Fifth and Hill, and it was a popular one. There was a chain of this. It was actually one of the burlesque club that was a chain, and I wish I could remember the name.
There was a chain of burlesque clubs.
Yes, and there was one here in LA, right there on Fifth and Hill. It's a Subway now. It was a club, bro. It was like it was competing with the Playboy Mansion, and Playboy clubs. You know, people were dressed up, and the girl and when it was in its heydays, and it was way before. You gotta keep in mind, people, at these burlesque shows, it wasn't like
yeah, these aren't like bare naked, like, you know.
And there was like, it wasn't like now, you know, like
high heel champagne
George
room.
Perez, comedian George Perez, working at his club and going, "Ladies and gentlemen, are you guys ready?" And then he'll play the music.
Right.
There was no DJ, people. There was no record player.
Right.
And even when there was a record player, they weren't playing records at strip bars.
Was it like a band?
They had an actual band.
That's so crazy, dude.
So when Burlesque died,
Yeah.
the band had to go somewhere else too.
Right.
So the band will play. If you want to look at a nice scene where there's a band playing and there's a girl dancing, it's The Odd Couple. The first 15 minutes when Felix Unger was walking around Manhattan, New York with a broken heart, he walks into one of these clubs.
You worked in a burlesque sort of. No, you worked a strip club before, right?
No, bro.
Did you do the storytelling show in a?
Oh yes, I did a show.
This is not happening.
This is not happening at Cheetahs, and that's a bar, a strip bar.
That's a strip club, right?
Yeah.
But
alcohol.
but you've never worked in a strip club like as a comic or anything like that.
No, man, just at the John.
Just as a regular goer, do you like? Because I always imagine, and I feel like that's something that should be brought back. Like wouldn't it be dope if there were burlesque shows with comics in between?
I did one with Sam Tripoli. Sam
Okay.
Tripoli had a room. Comedian Sam Tripoli. He had a room over there at it was called the Safari Room on Sunset.
Okay.
And he had a full-on burlesque show with 2 comedians, and you had to be dressed up to come in. Like everybody had to, all the men
You had to look sharp.
Had to look sharp, and the women had to look good. So me and Lisa got dressed up. I wore my tie. I had a suit that was fitted, and there was a woman who actually danced and she stripped.
Right.
And there was a guy who impersonated Prince exactly.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and there was
And he came in between the strippers as well.
Yeah.
What was the well, this is a burlesque show, so kind of, and then it's billed also as a comedy show. Because I also wonder,
2 comedians only.
I wonder what it was like to be
Was it Foley's?
No, but that's another one, bro. Foley's.
Foley's was a burlesque. I did remember
Foley's.
hearing that.
And so was the right there on Hollywood Boulevard, the Frolic Bar. It was a burlesque, but it's just a bar now.
What
And
about
then
the clown bar over in
the Clown Bar is.
That's
and then
where,
then the Jumbo Room.
the Jumbo Room? That's what
Yeah,
I
the
was talking
Jumbo
about
Room
in Thai Town.
Yeah, the Jumbo Room is.
And what's her name used to work there? Kurt Cobain's wife
Yeah.
came out of there.
Courtney Love.
Courtney Love, that's right. So
Jay Leno did strip bars, right? Not burlesque.
no, and that's the thing is like like when we talk about strip bars and burlesque, there's like because what happened is that comics worked burlesque. Burlesque died with vaudeville. Then there's radio, TV, and in between somewhere is working strip clubs. That's where Lenny Bruce got started. A lot of guys like that.
Burlesque, there were like those clubs that were open, like because they were open during Prohibition, huh? That's when I read that when Prohibition started, that's when the dirtier comedy was starting,
Right.
Like the real blue shit.
Yes.
because we already
Pasties, that's what they're called. Pasties. And then there's like these, you know, and I mean, I've seen them. My girlfriend used to do burlesque, so They're these little tassels with like sticky things on the end. They go over the nipples, and it covered the nipples. But that was nudity back then. That was like a strip joint. It might as well have been a strip joint.
So that theater, that burlesque theater I'm talking about, it was called, and it had no shame about it. And it was called the Pussycat Theater.
Get out of here.
And there was a pussycat on the side where the P was, like this. And it just called the Pussycat Theater. And it was a competition to the Playboy Theater, the Playboy Mansion Club, you know.
Really?
And then they did their thing, bro. And they had it was dinner, drinks, burlesque, and magicians, like probably back in the day. But then later on, bro, that Fifth and Hill got really, really seedy, bro.
Right.
Like, cause it was right next to Persian Square, Persian Park.
Okay.
And so yeah, over the Pussycat Theater, it was right there on Fifth and Hill, which is now.
Was that like a bad part of town, or
now, back then? Yeah, it still is, you know, cause that's where most of the buses meet.
Okay, so it's always gonna be like that.
Yeah.
So we're talking about burlesque, and I wonder how long that place existed before it disappeared, and I wonder how long it was there before, because that's something else that maybe we could do on future episodes of History for Fools, is talk about the trajectory of burlesque to strip joints, because it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about.
Well,
because,
what came first?
Well, I feel like burlesque did come first, and I think burlesque was their answer to like strip joints back then. Because like, man, I feel like even if you showed a little ankle back then, it was crazy. And so it was like risque, and like, women weren't it's really weird, man, because I've been watching a lot of like Miss Maisel, the what's the name of that show?
The Fabulous Miss Maisel.
Yeah, the Fabulous Miss Maisel. And I didn't realize how much has changed since then. I mean, we know a lot has changed since then, but women, were frowned upon for getting divorced. Women were frowned upon for being out by themselves, and so to be in a place where you have, little pasties over your nipples, and you're wearing almost basically nothing, and you're performing in this place, is probably like the worst thing you could be doing. And
pretty much an outlaw.
Right, you're pretty much an outlaw. And because there was also so many vagrancy rules back then that were being broken, or not vagrancy rules, like I don't know what they called it back then, but like using bad language, stuff like that. No, loitering is kind of hanging around. Fuck, I'm having a hard time finding the words. But so
chilling.
You had to, basically, you had to be careful. So comics
fast passing.
So comics who didn't make it in the Keith
so you're saying right now that
Albee circuit,
if that was going on right now, you mean to tell me that 30 comedians that were hanging out on the Sunday open mic at the Punchline would get arrested that night?
They would get arrested that night. They would, especially if they were working blue. And so they would go to these burlesque, they would perform. Decency laws, that's what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of decency laws. Man, I love that we have all these references, because I don't, like, I could read as much as I can, but I don't have it in my head sometimes. I think all the marijuana I've smoked.
There's so many hidden laws in performing, because some of these laws are still out there.
Right.
But every once in a while they'll pull it out to make an example of somebody. Because there's a law about bringing drugs, and then that person dies,
Right.
And I saw the Len Baez law.
Len Baez law.
Len Baez, I think he was a guy that was supposed to go to the Celtics, and he smoked a lot of crack that day, and then the next day he OD'd.
Oh no.
And so they went after the people that brought the drugs to the house.
Oh, so you go after the...
So that law still exists.
Right. You go after the supplier.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens now if a woman that I saw on TikTok, she was telling me, she told me this is how I went to prison, and then she said because the Len Baez law. They just threw it at her because they want to make an example of her.
So they're using the old laws to go after people from those times.
Let's not go after the drug dealer. Go after the person that brought the drug to the house.
Right, totally. So that's the thing is they're using these laws because we've had the First Amendment since before the times that we're talking about. And you think about freedom of speech now, and everybody's losing their shit over freedom of speech. You literally could get arrested for talking about fucking. You could literally get arrested for talking about pussy, ass, tits, whatever it was. You could go to jail for that.
It's funny how the vaudeville theaters, you know, they would have this long list of stuff you can't talk about. No double entendres.
Right.
Don't make jokes about sex. No sexual or anything. No sexual innuendo jokes.
At some point, Segway was.
Segway.
They said that they felt that Segway was
tags.
Yeah, it sounded provocative to say Segway or to use Segway, so they couldn't actually have Segway on the bill.
And no making fun of the president. Whatever.
Yeah, you could. That was totally back then.
And another one right now. Well, that was surprising me was. No jokes about Arabs.
That one was a weird one. I saw that.
Because I know, like, from hanging out, watching television, watching I Love Lucy, and watching the old shows
right.
from the black and white era, and then talking to my wife sometimes. Going to Iraq, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia,
yes,
back then,
yes,
was the thing to do. It was a vacation spot.
It was a vacation spot.
People were going to Iraq, Baghdad, Iran.
It hadn't
Saudi
been.
Arabia. It hasn't even been.
It hadn't been conservatively Muslim at that time.
It was, but it was Muslims still at the time.
Right.
But everything was cool, you know. This is before World War II.
So talking about Arabs, because Arabs are from a place that we go visit, it would be considered.
It was like going. It's like you go to Hawaii all the time, but don't do jokes about Hawaiians.
That's so weird.
The people were traveling to Iran. The people who have money,
right,
were going to Cuba to party.
Right.
The people who had money were going to Barbados. They were going to Iran, bro. It's surprising to think that people were going to Iran to party and
hang out. Well, I have seen, you know, because of like stuff that's happened in the news lately. You know, you see pictures of Afghanistan in like the 40s and the 50s. And it looks like our 40s and 50s.
And in Ethiopia too, man. Like when I watched the Anthony Bourdain show, and then I looked it up from back in the days. They had a big jazz scene in the 60s
out there
in Ethiopia.
Oh wow!
Before that, the dictator took.
It's a very interesting. That's a very interesting accoutrement to this, because it's like you think about comedy. You don't think about Arabs. You don't think about Arab vacations. You don't think about all the stuff we just talked about right now.
I had to know why they said no jokes about Arabs, and now pretty much they get the green light. Now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing now is that that I realize is like, because I mean, I had a really hard time in the beginning because I worked blue. I don't necessarily work blue anymore.
Did they ever tell you work with a comedian that you gotta work clean? My name is Keith Albee.
Fuck, dude. Do you know how many times you had to skirt around that to like... the funny thing is, too, man, is like, because we still get you have to work clean by... There's very few people. It's not as much as when I started 18, 17 years ago, you know, where everybody was like, you have to work clean. And then even at some point, like a veteran comic was like, bro, you have to come up with a clean set. Where I just came up with my set and took all the fucks out of it.
It's funny, man. Like, you ever work with a comic that tells you to work clean so he could work all blue?
Yep, I've had that happen. I've had that, and then there's a man who books shows in Reno who will tell you to go clean. Don't forget you got to work clean. Remember to work clean. Hey, did I tell you need to work clean? And then he throws up two bringers, and then they curse through the whole thing. And it's like, why the fuck am I being clean if your bringers are like able to like curse and...
What I don't like and what bothers me to this day is when you're at a showcase and there's a comic that wants to go up before you because you work blue. I mean...
Have you had that happen?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I had comedians tell me, "Oh, I'm doing a showcase right now. Can I go up before you? Cause I gotta do a clean set." That would always bother me. Like, when is the best time to do a clean set?
Right.
Because if you're funny,
It shouldn't matter.
it shouldn't matter, man. Because before, like, if I had an opener and he'll do like a hardcore dick joke, and if it was hilarious, I would not say nothing.
Right.
But if it was like oh, and there was more oohs than a laugh, I will bring that comedian. You know, I said, listen, bro. I said you should drop that joke and let the people like you first.
Right.
And then throw it in there.
Then throw it in later.
That joke is making you look like a big asshole.
And that's one of the things that I did realize too in my time was that you got to get them to like you first. And it's kind of like sales. You sell yourself. Like I remember being in sales and they would go, sell yourself first, get them to like you, and then they'll buy anything off of you. And it's kind of the same thing with comedy. Get them to like you, get them to love you, and then you can take them anywhere.
And that's funny what they say about on that book by the author.
Cliff Nesteroff.
He said that while vaudeville was clean, it bred discontent.
It did.
Because those comedians were party animals. And it's funny how these comedians follow the trend. Like back then, like Bob, the people before Bob Hope, every comedian had to have a cigar.
Right.
That was like a prop. Like you say the joke and nobody laughed.
Right.
And George Burns will puff in.
Yeah, it was like our answer. Like I do the same thing with. Well, it's not necessarily, but that's not
With your
necessarily the
ranch
same
water,
thing.
right?
I use my ranch water. Ranch water. I use my drink to like space my timing. So when you see comics taking a drink, this is like a trade secret. I don't know if it's like magicians where you're not allowed to share, but a lot of times when comics are taking a drink, it's so they can pace themselves. It's not because they're thirsty.
I never told anybody this, but when I was open micing at the right there at the Hollywood Hotel right there on Highland, they would do comedy on Sundays, comedy at Waldo's, and bro, I had did coffee houses for like 2 weeks, so I went up on stage with a cup of coffee, and I sat down on a chair and I did my jokes, and the guy that runs the comedy show, he's not even a comedian. His dad sings. You know, he's not a comedian. He's
Right.
a DJ.
Yeah, it's usually the case.
He said at this. His true colors came out. Felipe, what are you doing up there, man? Drinking coffee up there, trying to be like a white comic. He goes, that ain't you. That ain't you.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine you now? Like, were you trying something new? Was it just you trying something new, or were you trying something for that night?
I was trying to hide the fact that I was dumb.
Okay. Yeah.
I was trying to be more Saul.
You tried to go. I did the same thing with a blazer. Someone suggested
Blazer looking like that, dude.
Yeah, dude. Big Al was like, you know what, bro? If you wear a blazer, people will take you more seriously. And shout out to the most non-expert expert ever who lives in Texas now. I don't wear blazers. I wore a blazer for I think I wore a blazer for 5 days in a row, and I was out in LA, and somebody was like, I don't know what you're doing with that blazer on, but you just look like an asshole trying to you just look like an asshole trying to fit in to a group that you're not in. And so I just took the jacket off. I felt it was a distraction. I think you should go with who you are.
Who you are, huh?
Yeah, go with who you are. That's that's part of I think one of the things that I'm hoping to get out of this podcast is that New York comics will listen to this as well, because you're going to draw a lot of parallels. As I read this book, as I did a lot of research for this podcast, I draw a lot of parallels between us and them, because I don't feel like much has changed. Like the other day we were talking about, how they would struggle to get from one place to another. If you're doing really well in this business, and even back then, if you were doing really well, it was a lot easier to travel. But if you're not doing really well, a lot of new beginners, you're spending more money to get somewhere. And and then the thing with the strip joints too is kind of the thing as well. It's not that we work in strip joints or burlesque anymore, but if you're not working in and it's kind of relaxed, but I remember the emphasis on clean was really big about 15, 16 years ago. And you had to work shittier rooms. You couldn't work like a Punchline, or you couldn't work an improv, and if you did, they would ask if you could work clean, and it is so. I do draw a lot of parallels out of this, and find things, to be still somewhat the same, but a lot different. Like there's a lot of like we talk about racism, nowadays, and of course the racism between then and now is a lot different.
Especially with comedian names like the Marx Brothers, all their names were stereotypical names. Like Groucho, he's a grouch,
Right.
and then Zeppo, a zip, probably, I don't know.
Right. Who knows?
And Chico, Italian, but they're all Jewish.
Right.
And then the other one was Pinko. I guess he was a communist.
Was Chico one of the brothers, or
Yeah,
was he
he's
one of the
Italian.
additions to the? Because they had an addition to the Marx Brothers.
Well, yeah, but Chico was a brother.
Okay, Chico was one of the brothers.
Chico Marx,
Chico, Zeppo,
Marx.
and Groucho were the most famous ones.
Yes, and the one with a cello.
What the fuck was
He
that?
had the
guy?
harp. That's Harpo.
Harpo.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, and so everybody had a name. Like if you were like a cop and you were Irish, the Mick.
Right.
Mick the cop.
Bill Mick the cop Michelson or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody had and people. It was not frowned upon to have like a racial bit, and not everybody was considering it racist because it was all before World War II.
Well, and that was the thing, man, is that I think
World War II changed everything.
right. But what he explains in the book kind of makes sense to me is that back then everybody was an immigrant. So there was no
There was no third generation.
there was no second or third generation that was like, why the fuck are you making fun of us?
There was no third generation talking about we're Latinx.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so there was not a lot of emphasis on that, but there was a lot of racism towards the black comedians and towards the Jewish comedians. Black people suffered quite a bit in comedy because I was reading that at first I was thrown off. We talk about Burt Williams as one of the most prolific black comedians in the vaudeville era. He had to do blackface. And when I first saw him in blackface, I was like, is this a decision of his own? But the minstrel scene, which is the blackface scene, which is black comics in blackface doing black comedy. But it, and it's one thing for me to see white comics do blackface, which is totally offensive. But to make these guys do blackface because it was the only way that they could get paid and get on stage and do their thing. And then they had their own circuit as well, their own Chitlin circuit and stuff like that. I just try to draw as many parallels to now. We don't necessarily have minstrel night and we don't do blackface anymore, thank God. But we still have like chocolate sundaes and like, there's still a definite divide somewhat in comedy.
Sleep with your sister Friday.
Sleep with your sister. Is that a real thing?
Yeah, for like blue collar comics. But that's how offensive it was back then. People didn't care.
No, and they didn't care.
It's funny when somebody said that they're doing jokes about a lot of Swedes and German people, and they said they're not getting upset, and that's when Groucho Marx said, "Well, these people, Swedes, have never been oppressed.
Right.
These Germans have never been oppressed.
They don't, yeah. There was some towns that the Jewish comics
They never
couldn't
had
even
dictators,
go into.
Right. Of course they're not, those jokes, it's different, they're white people.
Right. Yeah, and they're part of here. And that's the thing is that, and as we use words now, like buzzwords like privilege and shit like that, that's what it was back then.
Privilege.
We just weren't talking about it. We just didn't think about it. And it's not like those people didn't know that they were oppressed or that they were treated as second-class citizens. They just, there was no reference to it. If it's like if you're born in like complete darkness, you don't even know what the light looks like. You're just going to assume that this is the way you live your whole life. And so back then, that's how people were treated. That's how those guys were treated. I was reading in here that I think it was the Marx Brothers that they would show up to certain towns, or they couldn't do certain towns because they would just get the shit beaten out of them.
The South.
Right. And then that was the other thing too, is can you imagine getting stuck in one of those train stations in between. And if you're
And you're a white comic with blackface still, you can't find a bathroom.
So the other thing too was there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. There was a guy who ran a show called the Ziegfeld Follies. Did you read about that?
Yeah.
Do you remember reading about that at all?
I've heard of those Ziegfeld Follies.
Did you hear? I know that when he was the one who first hired Burt Williams, and his whole crew of like musicians
with
and
blackface, huh?
and no, they were like, "Hey, we don't want this guy working with us." If you and it was him that was first like, well, I think the direct quote was, "Well, if you don't like it, then you can leave because I can replace all of you because there's many of you that I could replace with, but there's only one of him." And that's kind of what that's kind of what put him on the map. Was he was so funny. He was so well liked by both genres, and and even though he was doing blackface, it broke the mold into black comedians performing in front of white people.
Isn't that how ridiculous that sounds? Hey, we don't want to work with that Negro, that African American, that black person. No, he's gonna be blackface. Oh, okay.
They're like, all right, as long as he's doing blackface.
That's so stupid.
And blackface is a weird thing too, man. Where they would take a burnt cork, they would like wash it all over their face, right, and then they would pretend to be black. And again, we talk about guys that crossed over from the vaudeville era to the radio era. Bob Hope is one of those people that used to do blackface during the vaudeville era.
W.C. Fields, hey kid, you're bothering me, and Mae West.
Mae West did blackface?
Yeah, and Eddie Cantor, of course.
Right, Eddie Cantor did blackface. These are all, again, people that we're talking about that crossed over into radio later on.
Later on, and then they wiped their face and became white comics.
Bob Hope did blackface, and he stopped. And this kind of disappointed me because I always loved Bob Hope, but he used to do blackface. And then they actually told him not to do blackface, but not for the right reasons.
For what?
Because they told him that his facial gestures or features, his expressions, is what made him his money. And if you look at Bob Hope, yeah, it totally did.
He goes, your facial expressions after the jokes are hilarious.
Yeah.
And we couldn't see him with blackface.
They can't see him, so they made him stop doing blackface for that reason. Otherwise, he would have kept doing blackface.
They said that white comedians back then, they couldn't perform without a blackface because they had to, in order for a white person to express a personality, they had to be blackface. Because they had no personality, that guy said in that book.
Do you think that...
like, you see, white, they were too straight edge or too straight face
right.
to do the actual act. So when you're blackface, they could be like, hey.
So it had nothing to do with even being black.
No.
It just was like, oh, you're funnier if you're wearing this fucking like black shit on your face.
Yeah. Imagine not knowing that that's racist or you're hurting people.
Right. What's funny to me is that the material that they used and the whole blackface thing is like, if we saw someone doing something like that today, outside of like, fuck you, don't do that, we would be like, that's fifth grader humor. That's like fourth grader humor. The whole trajectory of, like when I listened to comedy back then, because I did a lot of like listening to as much old stuff as I could find, like it's not funny to me, but people are fucking dying in those shows.
But it's like when you're the first at that. Like there was no entertainment.
Right.
So the first person that tickles you, man, you're never gonna forget it.
Yeah, I guess.
But there was no entertainment. I was talking to a guy at a show I was there. And he said he wanted to do comedy, and he goes, the closest open mic is 2 hours away. And this is now in 2022. His closest comedy club to perform is 2 hours away. Now imagine 1901 before radio, or whatever year it is before radio.
Right.
How far do you think that town is from any type of entertainment back then? So to show up in blackface or to show up with jokes, You're a genius.
You're
man.
a genius.
My grandmother had never laughed.
I guess
Have you
it's like
seen
if
that
you've
before?
never had salt in your life.
Never.
And then you put a tiny bit of salt on a potato, you're like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever had in my life.
I would explain that feeling to these people who never heard comedy back then to the first time I ever had pad thai.
Yeah, okay.
When the first time I ever had pad thai, I felt like there was a bunch of people dancing on my tongue.
It's like a party.
With mobs full of spices.
Wow. Yeah, pad thai is pretty amazing.
Yeah, but to have like, say you were bummed all day, bro. You were working at a farm with your dad, and your dad had just killed your sheep that you've been having sex for the last year with. You know they killed her for dinner, and then somebody shows up, bro, with a cane and a top hat, and he's dancing, and you're in awe. And for the first time in your life, you thought about something to do with your life other than farming, bro.
Right.
Like, that's how that's the feeling I got the first time I ever heard or noticed stand-up comedy.
What was the first experience of stand-up that you had like seen or watched? Or
We watched it was a 33 album of a comedian, and we saw it, and we're like, whoa, wait, it's good. I fell asleep, and I memorized the whole thing.
My very first experience with stand-up comedy, I remember I had a friend who would listen to Bill Cosby records, but I didn't. I was like, what is that? Is it music? He says, not music. And so I didn't care. I didn't think it was interesting, or I didn't think it would be interesting, so I didn't watch or listen to it. Years later, my parents were making a big deal about getting this HBO special and my parents went and bought HBO for a month so they could get this special. And I never heard of Paul Rodriguez before in my entire life. But they rented HBO for a month so they could watch I Need the Couch. Do you remember that special?
Yeah.
That was the first time I'd ever seen comedy.
That one he had a little curly hair mullet and a sweater, huh?
Yeah, I was hiding behind the couch because we weren't allowed to watch it because it was dirty. He was working blue. And I remember hiding behind the couch, holding my mouth, trying not to laugh, trying not to like rap myself out. But that was my first experience with stand-up.
I was coming home from junior high school, and I was passing by these guys from the local gang. It was like a couple of cholos and a couple of black cholos, because there was black cholos back then.
That's crazy.
And they were chilling right there, man, with their Pendletons, and they had a boom box, and they were smoking weed and smoking 40s and listening to Eddie Murphy, Delirious.
Really?
And I passed by, and I was on the side, trying to listen.
Right.
And then like they heard me laugh, and they told me to get the fuck out of here. I got to the part about...
How old were you?
Fuck, I don't know. It's 8th grade, 14, 13.
Yeah.
13. And it was, or 13 years old, and it was to the part where the guys, shit. My mama was Clint Eastwood with that shoe. Get off the bed. Woo, 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 woo. And I was laughing, dog, and they heard me laugh. The fuck out of here, Holmes.
Did that make you want to be a was that the moment, or was...
No, bro, I was laughing and shit.
Right.
So back then, that's when I realized, bro, cholos laugh too.
They just don't laugh in public. Yeah,
They go to a hide somewhere.
I thought it was pretty rad that we have that we have a thing like that. And then growing up, I mean, my whole life, people would be like, you should try doing comedy, And I was like, it's the weirdest thing to me in America that
I'm sure back then in 1880, 1901, 1925, if you were to tell if your parents were not part of the entertainment business,
yeah,
they were just blue collar people like working in factories, and you would have tell your dad. First of all, you would have to tell your dad at 6 years old, because by fucking 15, you're already a man.
You're already a man, and then you're gonna die at like 30. You're middle aged at 15.
You're ready for the war, man. 16.
Right? Yeah.
You're a man. They're setting you up with somebody. Your parents might think you're crazy. My father thought I was crazy that I want to be a comedian.
Yeah. That's pretty much. I'm pretty sure that's still the the reaction from a lot of people.
But I know that now as a parent, now that I am a father, that the reaction that your parents got are their fears,
Right.
not your fears.
They're not your fears.
To them, it's like, oh, you're gonna be a comedian, because they know that's like a far-fetched dream that might not happen, because it might not happen for them.
Right.
But they want you to go that route. But I always think about it like this, I'd rather be miserable doing what I love than be miserable doing what I hate.
Yep. I discovered that too, man. It was like, oh, get a real job. Go fucking make a living. You know, and at the time I had a kid and a wife. Well, actually a little bit before that, I had just a wife. But
And even back then, comedians had to supplement their money with a hustle. Like some comedians, like in those days, so they were like we're getting back to the comedians that were smoking the cigars, after cigars, opium and opium. A lot of people were smoking opium.
right, back then.
And then people would show up selling morphine.
That's right, they did.
They
And a
were
lot of those
slanging it. They
theaters were
getting
used.
busted, bro. Or selling bud. Or
Right.
I love that great. I love booking that comedian. Not only is he funny, but he has great coke connections.
Well, and that was the thing back then. It was like you were this comedian, you were supposed to wear clean, and you were supposed to be this picture of perfection. But comics, even to this day, are not the cleanest, most wholesome people I've ever met in my life.
What led to you think to the end of the whole vaudeville and all these performing, and it must have been like it must have been like what's happening now when Instagram and these millennials started blowing up as TikTok comics.
Well, something always kills something off, and what killed
but you gotta progress and you gotta roll with it.
Well, a lot of people will say that it was radio that killed it, but I was reading
Because I know that video killed a pop star.
video killed the radio star, and that's not. I'm honestly that's funny that it's a song, but I don't think it's
TikTok killed the MTV
Yeah,
star.
exactly. No, TikTok came after YouTube. I think YouTube killed the fucking MTV star.
Yeah.
But so I did read a little bit into this, and it was
OnlyFans killed Pornhub.
No, I don't know about that, man. Because it's like $5 a month to see this girl, or free to see this.
OnlyFans pretty much killed the Peep Show game.
Yeah, that did do that.
Like, why should I go to a Peep Show where everybody knows I'm a pervert when I could just get an OnlyFans and have my own little private Peep Show?
You could just stay at home.
Peep that joke out. I heard that joke had no peeps.
So what I found out was that near the end of vaudeville, when they didn't know it was near the end, there was radios about, and at the time, radios were expensive and they were very, very modern technology. So I think there was only about 3 million radio sets in 1926.
And at the time when radios were coming out too, the theaters and the vaudeville owners and promoters, they were noticing that people were not going to their shows anymore because of radio. So they put a smear campaign like everybody else when something is new. Oh man, those radios suck up all your ovaries.
Yeah, or they'll
burn your house.
That it was burn your house down. I didn't hear the suck your ovaries thing, but they would come up with anything to scare you away from stuff.
Every new thing comes up with a scare, huh?
In 1923 there were 3 million radio sets. By 1936 there were 30 million. Now,
so people imagine, bro, people would turn on the radio, lean next to it,
yes,
light a pipe, and listen to Jack Benny.
right, like as if when at our age we sat and watched like Alf at night or whatever was on at 8:00 on a Thursday night.
These comedians that were on radio were getting paid, I think, more than when people are getting paid now to do stand-up specials.
Right. Oh, no, they were getting tons. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. What I think killed vaudeville, or what was part of killing vaudeville,
The church.
it was that near the end there, Keith Albee decided to put up huge, beautiful theaters where the dressing rooms were beautiful and ornate. And like when you go into the Fox or you go into the Orpheums now that are still around,
The paintings up in the wall.
how beautiful are they? They're amazing, right?
It's like, and I've been to the Orpheum Theater. I performed at the Orpheum
You were just
Theater.
at the Orpheum Theater.
Dude, it is prestige. It has like velour seats. It has everything's nice.
Everything's nice. So what happened, and this is some of the
It is
opinions.
like the AMC.
This is opinions of some of the comics back then. Was that vaudeville was made for the masses? It was made for, and back then the masses was poor people. The masses were your regular average person. And Keith Albee tried to dress it up, and I think the quote was, Keith Albee dressed up vaudeville theaters to kill. And it ended up killing vaudeville because people were like, I can't relate to this. It's too expensive to come in here now. And then at the same time that they were making the comics put on tuxedos and shit like that. And the comics weren't happy. And then these were like 5,000 seaters, 4,000, 3,000 seaters. And there's like 15 people because they would do two shows a day. And then they were also paying them thousands for doing that as well. So as that was dying off, radio was picking up, and now we're jumping into the radio era.
More money, huh?
Yeah, and paying way more money because now, as we're getting into radio, as we're leaving vaudeville, vaudeville by itself, there was no sponsorships, there was no Sony corporations trying to buy shit, there was no General Electric. It was like you go, you pay $2, $3 to watch the show, and then that's how they made their money, that's how they paid their people. So you got very meager earnings even if you were a very good comedian. But now we switch over to radio where marketing has now pushed itself.
Stooges that did vaudeville to the end, or
The Three Stooges started out in vaudeville. So the Three Stooges, and
they progressed from radio to film, or that they just died out?
No, they progressed from vaudeville to radio to film. And they did very little in radio.
Because they were a physical act.
They were a physical act.
Because I know that Jeff Healey, because I did see the Three Stooges movies back in the day.
Yeah.
Which was if you want to see a great Three Stooges movie, it's directed by Mel Gibson, and it was made for television.
Really? I've never even heard of this.
And Jeff Healey, he pretty much invented the Three Stooges.
Right.
Jeff Healey used to have a show where people would dive into a water.
Right.
He hired Mo Howard, and Mo Howard one of the divers. So
that's how it started.
One of the dives,
it's Ted Healy, by the way.
Ted Healey,
yeah.
my bad. Jeff Healey is the blind blues player.
Right. He's another guy.
Jeff Healey is the blind blues player in fucking Roadhouse.
That's right. Ted Healey hired Mo Howard after doing the diving thing.
Then a woman broke her neck and died.
Broke her fucking neck, bro. She fell on the side of the pool.
So then Jeff Healey said, "Screw all this, Mo. Go get two of your brothers." And let me tell you, man, how crazy this was. Ted Healey will slap the shit out of Mo Howard,
right?
Slap the shit out of Larry, and slap the shit out of Shemp.
Shemp was the first one, right?
Shemp with a.
And then actually the brother was in it too, but he was playing he was doing the music for the whole thing.
Yeah,
in vaudeville.
And fucking Ted Healey will slap fucking Shemp right in the face like this, smack, Will Smith style, and then after the show, the fool rubbing his face and getting his money, he'll be like, hey Ted, man, you really have to slap me so hard, and he'll look at Shemp. Listen, motherfucker, they gotta hear it in the back too, you know.
Could you imagine, bro? Can you imagine your first job in comedy is getting the shit beat out of you?
Ted Healey will pay them which was $100 a week, right? And he'll keep the rest, right? For the whole receipts.
Yeah.
And then one time Larry Fine said, "Hey man, has Ted ever heard of a raise?" Right?
Right.
And then Mo said, "Hey, if you want to spend your money all the time, you got the money left over. I'll keep $1 for myself and send the rest home." And he goes, and then Larry looked at Mo and goes, "Yeah, well, goes, wow, no, I guess no one else can live like you, Mo, huh?"
Right.
But Larry Fine like most comics now, and his vice was gambling, bro. And he would gamble all the time, and he would always have to borrow money from Mo. And then one time, he borrowed money from Mo. He wanted to borrow $60, and Mo whipped out his penis and started peeing on Larry Fine's feet and his pants. And Larry goes, Mo, why are you peeing on my pants? He goes, because next time I ask you for the $60, you'll remember.
That's a good way to get somebody to pay you back.
And Larry Fine never bought a house. Him and his wife just lived up hotels, room service, partying it up, getting it up.
The whole time they partied.
Yeah.
Partied.
Good time, bro.
That's the thing, man.
And then after Shemp left, they got Curly, bro, and that became Curly.
Curly was the violinist during.
Larry the violinist.
Larry was the violinist during the vaudevillian days, and it used to be called Ray Fine and his Three Southern Gentlemen. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, not Ray Fine.
Southern Gentlemen.
Ted Healy and his Three Southern Gentlemen. Yeah.
So they went to the South, and they realized there ain't no Southern gentlemen in the South.
No.
And so when they hired Curly had a full set of nice hair. By the way, in the movie The Three Stooges, Curly is played by what's his name, man? Damn, I can't think of his name right now. But he played the commish.
Oh, and then he was the guy in The Shield. That same guy. Yeah, I remember that guy.
Michael Chiklis. Michael Chiklis plays the best Curly I ever seen in my life.
Okay.
Like, he plays him. So Curly has a full set of hair, and then they cut his hair bald, and he's crying.
So they had to do. So they had to do the bald thing.
They had to cut his hair bald. He had a full set of hair, and it was beautiful hair. And he's crying, bro.
Oh no!
He goes, Mo, you're making me ugly. Mo, you're making me ugly. And so when they're performing,
right?
And let me tell you, man, Curly. You talk about comedian performing physically. The motherfucker performs 200%. Mo slapped him, and then Curly walks up to Mo at the end of the show. Mo, what's wrong with your hand? They got a hair in the back too.
So so those hits were real.
Yeah, Curly said.
Those were real slaps.
Curly said, you slap me harder so you can hear it in the back. Shem said, what's wrong with you?
That's fucking hilarious.
So when the Three Stooges left Ted Healy said, I'm going to kill you motherfuckers. And anybody that hires the Three Stooges, I'm going to burn the theater down. So that's why there's always a fireman or somebody at every theater.
At every theater?
Yeah, or a fire marshal.
When they were performing?
Yeah, every theater now, every movie set had a fire marshal.
Were they banned from certain places to work?
Ted Healy blackballed them. And he had a gun all the time. And so Champ was totally scared, of
Ted Healy.
Of Ted Healy, that he would wet the bed.
Really?
And then Larry would be like, damn, Mo, your brother wet the bed again. So Shem left, bro, because he couldn't take the anxiety, and that's when they hired Curly. And then, bro, Curly was so famous that hot chicks, he'll think that hot chicks would want to have sex with him, bro, and they would just slap the shit out of him.
They just wanted to hit him. They just wanted to beat on him.
And then they'll slap the shit out of him. So
not sexually.
No.
Just
they want to slap him.
They wanted to hook up with him so they could hit him and then bounce.
So there's a scene where these two hot chicks are slapping the fuck out of him, and he walks away to his room crying, bro. So he ended up dying, bro, of depression and like getting fucked up. And then Shemp comes back, right? So then Shemp dies. And then they finally hired the last Three Stooges, Joe. Joe said, fuck you, Mo. I don't take a pie to the face.
Really?
And he never took a pie to the face.
So that's what ended probably the Three Stooges.
But that Joe ended up working more, and if you see every other Three Stooges movie, it's that Joe.
It's that Joe. Okay, because that's the thing is I know there was a bunch of replacements, and that was always joked about in like the 80s for some weird reason.
Yeah, Joe was in the big movies. Curly was in the little sketches.
No shit.
And what happened when in the movie when they said, I want Warner Brothers or said I want to hire the Three Stooges or Columbia, whoever it was, I want to hire the Three Stooges. they said I want to hire the Three Stooges, but no Ted Healy.
Really?
And then Ted Healy said, you know what? He tried to sue them. But goes, I own yuck, yuck, yuck.
He did say that. He tried to trademark nyuk, nyuk, nyuk. That's so crazy.
And he was crazy, bro. Like there was a comedian that supposedly his claim to fame was he invented a Bloody Mary because he was hungover one night and he fucking put in vodka with juice and hot sauce, I guess. But he named it after Ted Healy's wife.
This is the story that you were telling me this morning at breakfast.
Yeah.
Was that this guy had taken his wife, right? And then he named it after her. Then he tried to shoot him later or something.
They tried to kill him.
Tried to kill him.
Back then, bro, people would just pull the gun out, bro.
Well, there was no like fucking background checks.
Yeah, man. Like Hank Williams, bro. The way he met his wife after a show, he walked up to a guy and put a gun to his head. He goes, "I'm gonna marry your girlfriend."
Okay, all right. Things have changed since then. They're not as can't be as direct. You have to swipe right before you can put a gun to her head. You have to see if she wants to go by they.
Was there
they, them, or he, she,
was there any female comedy groups back then?
Not many.
Tough,
not many. No, there was like a Mom's Mabley, and that was like, well, that was on the Chitlin circuit. And that was the other thing is Mom's Mabley. Now that we're in this area, Mom's Mabley was kind of like a frontier. Like she uncovered a lot of ground. She was a breakthrough personality.
She was groundbreaking.
Well, she's groundbreaking. That's what I was trying to say. She's groundbreaking because there was no women in vaudeville. Period. There's not in the white and in the Borscht Belt. There was none.
And even the men didn't do it like her, huh?
No. Mom's Mabley was the very first. Like I feel like one of the very first female comedians.
She set the bar for prior to the future, huh?
Huge. Bro. Yes, definitely.
And
it's funny to think all these people that we barely even talk about not only influenced the comedians to this day, because when you think about like, you know, who inspired this person to inspire this person, who inspired like George Carlin, who inspired Louis C.K. So you think about the timelines and you think about the trajectory of where these comics that we now see, like Bill Burr or
Bill Hicks,
you know, and where they came from. And Mom's Mabley, like you were just saying, was the very first, but that's where Richard Pryor.
Yes.
That led someday to Richard Pryor. That led someday to Eddie Murphy. That led.
Yeah. And then Mom's Mabley, one of her jokes when I saw her on the Ed Sullivan Show, because like a lot of black comedians, they were killing it in forever and they didn't get their time till later on when a white comic decided, no, this is fun, I'm gonna put him in my show. So Mom's Mabley was on his show, and one of her bits was, so the police pulled me over and said, "Ma'am, didn't you see that red light?" I said, "Yeah." "So why did you go?" "Because I thought that light was for us. Because y'all got green, we got red." I mean, y'all separate everything else. So I thought y'all had red, we
wow.
had. And she made a Jim Crow joke.
That's very bold for that
Without
time.
saying a Jim Crow
That's
joke.
very bold for that time.
On television in the 60s.
Yeah, when that was not allowed. That was not allowed at all.
And she didn't get no boo.
Yeah.
Everybody got it. It was
yeah, there was
simple.
not, and you weren't allowed to be political. You weren't allowed on TV, radio, you know, and as we move into radio now, you know, like I said, there were, what did I write down? I wrote it down.
Show them your comedy Bible.
Here's the comedy Bible. And look at that. Look at all the, and then even more last night. And as we go through, you're going to see this thing get more and more colorful. But here we go. In 1923, 3 million radios And by 1936, there were 30 million. So radio had started to take over. Vaudeville fell for whatever reason. I do think it was a combination of it was too nice and that radio was just an easier thing. The Depression happened. The stock market fell. People didn't have a lot of disposable income. So going, and $2 back then is a lot of money, so people didn't have $2 to go to a show. But radio was free, and that was because of marketing. Marketing started to come around. You had companies like General Electric or Hoover or all these like companies that would pay you. I think one of them was Philip Morris, which was a cigarette brand back in the day. Camel
Lucky
Cigarettes
Strike.
had one. Lucky Strike had radio shows. And
Texaco.
so now we're moving into this area of like, you're not just getting paid $5 a week to work for me. I'm going to pay you $5,000, and $5,000 in 1936
Jesus Christ.
is, you might as well be a millionaire.
Yes, man. Because nobody was making $5,000 a year.
And you're doing, I think Eddie Cantor, who was one of the first radio personalities, got $100 a minute to do a 5-minute monologue in 1936.
It's funny how you mentioned Eddie Cantor because he's supposed to be like the family man. I trust him with my daughter.
Right.
But he was like the filthiest, dirtiest grab-asser off stage.
All of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Remember that one time he had a thing that during like when they're doing the radio show,
Yeah.
he liked to goose women. Goose, it's pretty much a nice way to say grab.
Yeah. You would like pinch
asses.
their butt cheeks.
Pinch their butt cheeks. So they're doing a sketch. So he pinches this girl's ass, and the girl says, "Mr. Cantor."
Well, he would do it because you're on the radio.
You're radio.
Like, if someone were to come grab my ass right now, I mean, I'm doing this thing. I can't. Hey, dude, don't fucking grab my ass. And then that one
I saw
girl.
Japanese porn like that with a woman telling the news. Anyway, that's another story. And she has to tell the news
Yeah.
while sharks were passing by.
Well, sharks
Nah.
are people trying to grab her ass.
No, bro. It was. I don't want to get to that.
Now I want to know.
All right. It's an Asian woman, and she's telling the news like Connie Chung, while dudes are passing by, masturbating, and
No
jizzing on
way.
her, bro.
Oh, wow. Okay, maybe I didn't want to know.
And
Holy
she's still in
shit.
character, like we're getting back to like girl getting paid.
Yeah, so that's the modern version of what happened to this lady from Eddie Cantor. And Eddie fired her, right?
She said, "Mr. Cantor," and then after they went to a commercial, fire that woman.
Fire that bitch.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was sleeping with everybody, and he had a wife.
Had a wife at home and 5
But
daughters.
as long as people tuned in, they didn't care, right?
No. Well, that was the thing is nobody would believe that he was a bad
Who
guy.
brought him down? Jack Benny?
Jack Benny ended up bringing him down because
Fresher face, smarter.
well, there was and Jack Benny came a little bit later. Actually, Eddie Cantor came along. It was Eddie Cantor, and then Eddie Cantor kind of fell off and was taken down a little bit later on. But there was another guy that had come out, and his name was Joe Penner. And Joe Penner was kind of like, he was discovered by Rudy Valley. Rudy Valley was like a singer, and he was kind of like the Johnny Carson of that day.
Rudy Valley, by the way, is the dad of Frankie Valley.
Is that true? I was wondering if there was a...
I think there was a mention that he was.
It might have, and I didn't...
Maron.
Oh, that's right. There was a mention, and I just didn't put it together.
Speaking of
This
planes-
is great World War II radio, like, background.
We're talking about the 40s, man. We're being attacked, but no, we're in Pearl Harbor.
I told you, remember when I rode the bike over there? I said they were getting ready, they were getting the World War II. He said,
History for Fools, ButchEscobar, Felipe Esparza.
what's up?
History for Fools. Thank you very much, ButchEscobar.
Thanks for
Hope
watching.
you guys liked this episode. Don't forget to
Are listening.
subscribe up here. And what's your Instagram again?
At Butch Escobar, BUTCH Escobar.
And you know I'm Felipe Esparza at FelipeWorld.com. And for those of you guys who are listening for the first time, thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you are somewhere where there are a lot of computers available, like the Apple Store or the Microsoft Store, I suggest you grab those podcast apps that are on that computer and add our podcast.
That's a good way to do it.
We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
See you guys next time. Okay.